Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking time to be with us. This is, needless to say, an incredibly difficult subject for any of us to be here to even talk about. You know, we live in Nebraska. It's just really, really hard to comprehend that we have this problem in Nebraska. I don't know about you, but in the last year, when I started learning more, I said, somebody's got to be making this stuff up. I live in Nebraska. I love Nebraska with every ounce I have. All the people I meet in Nebraska are incredible. We can't have the darkest possible sin taking place in Nebraska, for crying out loud. So today's really the hardcore reality is we do. Hardcore reality because of a lot of things, of evil and bad things and these silly things. We have things happening to young kids and to women, young girls, that's despicable and beyond comprehension to believe. Here's the thing why today is so important from my seat. Number one, you're going to hear from people that are working really, really hard to stem it. We have an officer that found 6 kids last night. Officer, would you please stand and be recognized so we can give you a... Prayers for the officers that work in this stuff. I can't imagine the emotional toll. But here's why today's so incredibly important. We have to shine the light on it. We have to make sure that Nebraskans understand today we need to be greater neighbors, better than ever before. We can't be a neighbor that says, well, you know, these folks just moved in and, you know, they've been here 6 months and I haven't gotten to know them. That just doesn't work. Because who knows what could be going on in that house? Just to knock on the door and introduce ourselves and engage can make an incredible difference. Because the hardcore reality is sex trafficking is happening in all 93 counties, and there could be a young little girl that lives right next door to us being victims. Here's what gets me fired up. When Nebraskans know we have a problem, we step up and solve it together every single time. So I think that's what's really important today for us to say we have a problem in Nebraska. We have a human sex trafficking problem in Nebraska. It's a bummer to say, but when we find a problem, we can solve it, we identify it. We know that this is a huge problem in part because of all the organizations represented here today. Everybody here knows. Everybody here is rolling their sleeves up. We have an incredible place to live, but it's really important that we find these predators and these criminals. Human trafficking is not always visible. That's the hard thing. It can be right next door and we don't see it. But it is everywhere. It's really important that we all spread the word. And as I like to always say, it's really important that every one of us get comfortable being uncomfortable talking about it. Any of us comfortable talking about human sex trafficking? I would doubt it. But I think we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable talking about it so we can have a great impact on every victim. The groups that are represented here today, including law enforcement, are working collectively and tirelessly to end human trafficking. The highest calling of government is to keep us safe. Keep our kids safe, keep our families safe, keep our elderly safe. So the Nebraska Human Trafficking Task Force, I give just gigantic kudos. They are led by Attorney General Hilders and they've done outstanding work. Attorney General, we're really, really proud. Thank you very much. So the fight to end human trafficking requires continued collaboration across all local and state government, community partners, nonprofits, survivors, business leaders, community members, neighbors looking after neighbors. It's a team effort. And thanks to this team effort and to the credit of the many folks that are in this room, we are making a dent. We're making some progress. Senators have also been key in this effort by passing legislation aimed at identifying and punishing individuals who engage in these crimes. As I love to say, together we can, together we will, together we'll end sex trafficking in our state so that we don't have to talk about it. I'd like to introduce an extraordinary warrior for safety in the state of Nebraska, FBI Special Agent Gene Cowell. Thank you, Gene.
Governor Pillen, thank you for the introduction, and thank you for bringing attention to this horrific issue. I know in law enforcement, often you come across the worst of the worst that humanity has to offer. And I think human trafficking defines that. But if you're lucky, you may also come across the true transcendence of the human spirit, people reaching out to help others. And I think that's also represented with this violation, as represented by everyone in this room come together to fight this horrific crime. I want to say, I think it should be noted that the state of Nebraska takes a very aggressive approach to combating human trafficking and bringing justice to victims. I'm thankful, Governor, for your leadership, Attorney General Hilders, Colonel Bolduc, for your leadership in this arena, for making our state a hard target for those who wish to perpetrate these types of crimes and traffic other people here in Nebraska. You know, without a doubt, human trafficking is a form of modern-day slavery. And people, even in the heart of the heartland, are being bought, being sold, being exploited, leading lives of misery, whether being forced into sexual activity, living and working in dangerous and dirty conditions, or being forced to work grueling jobs of little to no pay. Anyone can be a victim, kids, adults. I think one important point is that what makes this crime especially horrendous is that often the people who are victimized are also the ones who are already the most vulnerable members of our community. And traffickers will use violence, they'll use manipulation, they'll use false promises to exploit victims. And it's also important to note that even though people might seem like they're free to go, even though a victim might seem like they're free to go and can come and go as they please, they can still very well be a victim of human trafficking. You know, their imprisonment may be based on the form of threats or extortion or physical violence that you can't see. So we take a very victim-centered approach to this violation, in part because of how hard it is to be a victim and how hard it is to come to talk to law enforcement, and also because working with victims is vital to holding those accountable. So our role in the FBI is really to work with all of our law enforcement partners here to investigate cases, to dismantle criminal enterprises, to bring justice and provide support for victims, and to bring the full resources of the FBI to bear to support federal and local investigations in this arena. We have a task force which aggressively pursues cases, and we're very close to the Attorney General's office and their task force and the State Patrol to ensure we're supporting them every way that we can in their righteous efforts. So we're very grateful for the work of our partners in this arena. This problem is growing, unfortunately, and it can't be combated by one agency alone. It takes a whole of government, really a whole of society approach to combat human trafficking. And I think the work of everyone here today is critical to that endeavor. So I'm glad to stand shoulder to shoulder with everyone here today to do everything we can to aggressively pursue and apprehend traffickers and bring some measure of justice and closure for the victims. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. Gene's an extraordinary warrior and loves the people of Nebraska. Next, I'd like to introduce Colonel Bolduc, who heads up the Nebraska State Patrol. I'd be remiss if I didn't share something that I really greatly appreciate that I've learned in the last 2 years about the Nebraska State Patrol. What's the big challenge we have in the state every business in the state, workforce, right? Not enough people. What happens when we don't have enough people most of the time? We kind of lower the bar, lower the standards so we get the team filled. I'm incredibly proud of Colonel Bolduc's leadership in the Nebraska State Patrol. They have not changed a standard one iota. The graduating classes are just a tick smaller than they've been, but the quality, the character of the people that are charged with keeping us safe doesn't shrink one iota. So I'm incredibly grateful from the Nebraska State Patrol and the leadership of Colonel Bolduc and all the work he does here. Colonel Bolduc.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, everybody, for being here for this very important topic. Our team at the Nebraska State Patrol is proud to be a part of this effort to fight human trafficking here in our state. But I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the many members of the team that are part of this incredible effort on this front. From the Attorney General's office and his team, the governor and his team, our elected officials, our state senators who've been behind this effort for several years now, and of course our local law enforcement agencies across the state, our FBI partners, Homeland Security investigations, and numerous advocacy organizations that are at the table with us to fight this challenge. This is an outstanding team from a lot of different disciplines that work together on this. But there's another member of this team that we've had a tremendous partnership with over the last several years, and that's Truckers Against Trafficking. They're an advocacy group that engages the trucking industry and helps to educate them on what they can do to help combat this crime in our state. And their efforts have really made an impact. They have helped us to rescue victims, identify perpetrators, and hold them accountable. So a big shout out to Truckers Against Trafficking. They are making a difference in this industry. And I want to thank them for what they do in our state. But there's one more partner that we have to acknowledge, and that is the public. The public can be a member of this team as well. And that is one that's going to make a difference. In 2022, the Human Trafficking Task Force launched our very own hotline. Now, there is a nationwide hotline, but we wanted to bring this focus right back here to our state. So we created a Nebraska hotline to report suspected cases of human trafficking. And that hotline is 833-PLEASE-LOOK, or PLS-LOOK, which is 833-757-5665. That's an easy outlet for anyone who sees something suspicious to make the first report and get law enforcement involved immediately. The hotline is housed right here in our own NSP dispatch center. So when somebody makes a call to that line, they're talking to an NSP dispatcher and getting that information out to local law enforcement or state law enforcement as quickly as possible. In 2023, the hotline received 98 calls, resulting in dozens of tips. Our dispatchers have also fielded requests to connect victims to resources that are available here in our state. The hotline is a local touch point for Nebraskans to make that first report. If there's something actionable, this dedicated team is already in place to investigate, and that's whether it's NSP or one of our local law enforcement partners across the state. Please understand this. You can make a difference. Stopping the evil of human trafficking takes a team effort, and the public is certainly a part of this team. If you suspect human trafficking, please make that call, 833-PLEASE-LOOK. Thank you.
Maybe first, before I introduce General Hilgers, I want to say thank you to all the members of the unicameral for being here, because what takes place in unicameral is a key piece of making sure that we keep folks safe. I'd like to recognize Gene Klein from Project Harmony. I did not, Gene, if you'd stand up, please. And so we, going there, I learned something that I think is important for us all to learn, that the sex trafficking game is extraordinarily sophisticated. It's sophisticated like the cartels that are bringing extraordinary drugs in from the border, and they have a network. And so it's going to take legislation to make sure that when we find people, we can hold them accountable, we can lock them up and throw the keys away. And that's why I'm so grateful for Attorney General Hilgers and our unicameral, another key piece of working together, solving the problems, and making sure we hold the worst of the worst accountable. Attorney General Hilgers.
Well, good morning, everyone. First, let me thank Governor Pillen for the opportunity to be here. I want to thank him for your leadership, making January Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And I know personally from our work with you and your team, Governor, that your dedication to fighting and winning this battle doesn't stop at the end of the month, and it continues 365 days a year. So thank you very much, Governor, for your leadership. We gather in January every year to sort of take stock of where we are in this fight. And I think when we do, it's a reminder for all of us what we're fighting against. We know that this is a scourge of humanity. We know and we are reminded that this just does not happen only on the coasts. We know it does not just happen in Omaha or in Lincoln or in our big metropolitan areas. We know that this is a fight that takes place from west to east and north and south in our state. And we're also reminded, though, that as part of this fight that is in front of us, we also are reminded that we're going to win. And we're reminded because we have the right people on the team. And it starts with leadership behind me, our amazing federal and state partners with Colonel Bullock and the FBI, the Special Agent Cowell. It also extends to our amazing unicameral, our senators. And I will tell you, for my money, there's not a legislative body in the entire United States that is more committed, more dedicated, more proactive, more focused and operating in a spirit of collaboration and service than the Nebraska unicameral. And they have given us the funding and the tools and the ideas and the innovation to be successful. So I would like to specifically recognize all the senators here and thank you for all of the work that you've done. I want to also thank my team. We have an amazing team that helps run the Human Trafficking Task Force. I want to recognize all of our law enforcement partners from across the state, many of whom are here. And last, but certainly not least, all of our community stakeholders. There is a wealth of talented servants who are helping survivors, they're helping train, they're helping organizations, they're working with as big a heart as you can find in the state of Nebraska tirelessly to help us win the fight. And we couldn't be as successful as we are as a team without them. So I want to specifically recognize all of those groups as well that are here. Any multi-year campaign is certainly one that wants to be successful. I think it's helpful to take stock of what we've done in the previous year and what we're going to do going forward. And I think by all accounts, this last year in 2024, we've had a very successful one, building off of our previous successes. I just want to give you a few things. We've issued our report today. You can find a lot more detail in our 2024 report. But let me just give you a few for instances. One thing, we continue to double down as an office on training. We trained over 2,000 people across the state of Nebraska in 2024. And if we're going to win this fight, it's going to take a lot more people in this room, people who can recognize the signs of trafficking, understand what to do, understand that they need to call 833, please look, know what it looks like so we can fight back in every corner of this state. We trained over 2,000 people last year. For the first time in our state's history, we held our inaugural Human Trafficking Summit last September in Kearney. We had over 200 people from across the state, people in private industry, people in civic groups, people, public service groups, people in law enforcement coming together, sharing ideas, working together, getting that 1 + 1 = 5 relationships built and solidified so that we could continue to fight together. So we had our first one last year. I also want to recognize our amazing work and the work of our team and the tribal community. 2 years ago, the legislature, Senator Raybold's here with her leadership, helped get one of the first in the country missing and murdered Indigenous persons liaisons, and Grace Johnson on our team, first one in Nebraska. She's here today. She and Annie Boatwright, our state forensics nurse, worked together with the 12 Clans Hospital in Winnebago. In fact, Joe Kissling is here somewhere. I think she's still her. There she is in the corner. And they trained their own forensic nursing team at the hospital, which is going to make a tremendous impact in us helping survivors and helping to prosecute these crimes. And so that was another success that we had over the last year. The calls to the hotline that the Colonel mentioned continue to go up. By the way, it's 833, please look, that's 833-757-5665. So those are just a few of the highlights, our prosecutions, our investigations, our work continues. As we head to next year, just a couple things to look forward to. One is we're going to have our second Human Trafficking Summit. It'll be in Lincoln at the Innovation Campus on September 16th. Registration will open in the summer. We're hoping that we will crush the 200 attendees that we had last year. We're going to continue to double down on the things that we know work, which are training first responders, training people on the front lines, training citizens across the state of Nebraska. And we, as an office, are going to double down on our investigative work, working with some of the tools that we've been given from the Nebraska legislature. I think specifically some of the more sophisticated technologies to really take the fight against these traffickers that the governor mentioned that we need to really help ramp up our own investigations and prosecutions. And so we hope as the year progresses, we'll have more to announce there. So as we go, it's great to see so many committed people. I think this is it's a reminder of some of the deep sadness that occurs and hurt that occurs in our state, but it's also such a reminder of the tremendous heart of the state that we live in and all the amazing people that are here, that they all have come today in January to help celebrate our work in fighting against this scourge. And I look forward to seeing you next year and talking about all the great work that we've done in 2025, because we will win this fight. Thank you.
Well, I think we can conclude, and I think that the awareness is the first step in identifying and solving a problem, and just a tremendous amount of work's gone on in Nebraska in the last several years. So with that, one of my privileges as being governor is to sign a proclamation, and proclamations are a formal way of making sure we're all on the team and that we all create the awareness. I'll do that real quick. And then so that we can all step up and help educate our neighbors and have an incredible impact. So the proclamation will read, whereas the state of Nebraska will not tolerate this crime in any form and will continue the fight to end human trafficking. And whereas human trafficking can only be completely confronted by an educated citizenry. Now, therefore, be I, Jim Pillen, Governor of the extraordinary state of Nebraska, do hereby proclaim the month of January 2025 as Human Trafficking Awareness Month in Nebraska, and I do hereby urge all citizens to take due notice. So let's get that proclamation out everywhere we go. So thank you all. Congratulations. In the end, just can't thank everybody enough for being here, and we'll open it up to the media for questions if you have any. Andrew?
Maybe for Iggy Hilgers, can you kind of go into the details of how many folks you guys have prosecuted this year, what your investigations look like?
Repeat the
Yeah, thanks you. So Andrew asked, can I go into a little more detail in terms of the number of prosecutions we've had in our investigations? A couple things, caveats. The specific numbers are in the report. I think this last year, it was close to 27. The investigations oftentimes happen with our partners in the State Patrol and are prosecuted by our partners in the County Attorney's Office. And sometimes they don't have the specific, it's not maybe the felony of human trafficking, but there are adjacent felonies that get charged. So sometimes the math is hard to collect with precision, but the numbers continue to go up, and I think we're about at 27, Andrew.
Anyone else? Andrew?
Is there another measure to success in human trafficking, if not prosecutions? I mean, 27 is not a small sum, but it's for the entire state for the whole year.
Yeah, it's a good question. The question is, there's another measure of success. I mean, ultimately, the goal is to have zero. I mean, that ultimately is the goal. And I think as you go towards zero, which is where we all want to head, there are things that I think are metrics that you can look at to help say how far along towards that goal that we're going. One, of course, is prosecution investigation, But for us, it's also the things that we know will lead us to be successful. So I think training is actually a really important metric. To be able to train in the last year 2,000 people. These are people now who are empowered to be able to identify human trafficking. We want to make sure traffickers know that they have no place to hide in the state of Nebraska, and we want to be able to dissuade them. So those are some of the things we look at to say, are we on the right track? But ultimately, Andrew, we want to get to zero prosecutions because it's just not happening. So we want 0 victims and 0 survivors. Do you have anything to add?
The Nebraska Examiner. The governor said early on that it was a growing problem. Can you give us some data points or something to substantiate the growth?
The question was, we talked about the growth of this challenge and what are the data points with respect to the growth. Again, I would refer you back to the AG's report that came out today. But I would say one measure of the increase is just the fact that the number of calls to the hotline have increased. That is in part because of the education piece, getting the information out, and certainly that is turning into more actionable tips, and that, I think, represents a growth in this crime. And certainly to expand on that, we're just seeing more victims nationwide. Certainly we all watch the news. We see more vulnerable folks coming across the southern border. Ultimately, many of them have been victimized and will be victimized once they come into this country. So in talking to my colleagues across the country, we are seeing increases in these types of crimes, which I think would be expected. Thank you.
Andrew, last question.
The Attorney General mentioned, I guess, technology needed to ramp up prosecutions and investigations. What does that look like, and what do you need from the law?
Yeah, so good question, Andrew. The question was, I mentioned technology that was needed to help fight against some of the sophistication of it. And I want to be clear, it's not, the legislature's already appropriated money actually in the previous biennium to help us go and get some additional. The state is contracted with HCI Labs, which is a Nebraska-based company that has a very sophisticated platform that we think will help really level up our ability to identify these trafficking rings. And so as we head into 2025, it's one of our goals is to make sure that we have the investigatory resources to match the sophistication of the technology. And so it's not that we're going to the legislature to ask them to give us something we don't already have, although that's an ongoing appropriation. It is really utilizing that in a much more sophisticated, robust way in 2025. Does that answer your question?
Okay, well, I think we'll close it up. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And I see Anna Kastner here, Nebraska Bankers. We had a press conference last summer. There's been an extraordinary focus from most of the lenders in the state of Nebraska, I think would be fair to say. And, it takes resources and it takes more teams and organization that help keep building the Army. So don't be bashful to spread the news. So thank you all for being here. Godspeed.